The first arrow came through the nursery window without sound. Glass shattered inward in a cascade of crystal shards that caught the afternoon light, transforming into 1,000 falling stars. The projectile buried itself in the cushioned wall 3 inches from where Alira, crown princess of the Valthek dynasty, had been standing 1 heartbeat before. The human woman named Sarah Chen had moved faster than physics should have allowed for her species. One moment she'd been arranging educational blocks on the floor, the next she'd crossed 12 feet of open space, swept the 4-year-old princess into her arms, and rolled them both behind the reinforced reading desk, all before the second arrow punched through the space the child had occupied. "Protocol Crimson," Sarah said into her communicator, her voice steady as bedrock despite the adrenaline that must have been flooding her system. "Nursery compromised. Multiple projectiles. Unknown assailants." Illyra's mother, Queen Vishara, had been in the adjacent sitting room reviewing diplomatic correspondence when the world exploded into chaos. She'd hired Sarah Chen 6 months ago despite the protests of her military advisors, who'd called humans soft, weak, unsuited for royal household positions. The human had arrived with impeccable references from 3 separate systems, a warm smile, and eyes that missed nothing. Now those eyes were calculating angles, assessing threats, and keeping Alira calm through a combination of gentle pressure and absolute confidence. "Count with me, sweetheart," Sarah murmured to the princess, her hand cradling the child's head against her shoulder. 1, 2, 3, deep breaths. Just like we practiced. The royal guards burst through the main doors 8 seconds after the first arrow. Commander Talvon, a Valthek warrior with 40 years of military service, swept the room with his weapon raised, his secondary arms already reaching for the princess. "Hold position," Sarah said, still crouched behind the desk. "Sniper nest, northwest quadrant, elevation advantage, 2 shooters minimum." "They're waiting for movement." Talvin's eyes narrowed. No human should have tactical awareness that precise. His helmet sensors confirmed her assessment 3 seconds later. 2 heat signatures in the tower complex across the palace gardens, exactly where she'd indicated. "How did you know?" he asked. "Arrow trajectory and timing. Second shot came 0.4 seconds after the first from a different angle. Wind compensation was identical, meaning coordinated fire. They're professionals." Another arrow shattered against the reinforced window frame. Sarah didn't flinch. Alira did, her small hands clutching at her nanny's uniform. "You're safe," Sarah whispered. "I promise. Count with me again. 1, 2, 2, 3. Queen Vishara arrived with 12 additional guards, her ceremonial robes billowing behind her like storm clouds. She'd been briefed in the corridor, and her face showed nothing but the cold calculation of a monarch who'd survived 3 assassination attempts before her daughter had been born. "Status," she commanded. 2 confirmed hostiles, possibly more. Coordinated strike. They're not random. Sarah shifted, keeping herself between the window and the princess. "This was planned, Your Majesty. They knew which window, which time of day. Someone inside provided intelligence." The words fell like stones into deep water. Internal betrayal was the nightmare every royal family feared. Guards looked at each other, suspicion blooming like poison. "Evacuation route?" Vishara asked Talvon. "East corridor is clear?" "Armored transport waiting." "They'll expect that," Sarah interrupted. Nobody contradicted a queen in the Valthek court, especially not a foreign servant, but the human continued without hesitation. "They chose this time because it's your daily meditation hour. You're predictable. They'll have the east corridor covered." Vishara studied the human woman who'd been playing blocks with her daughter 5 minutes ago. "What do you suggest?"
"West service tunnels."
"They're narrower, harder to monitor. Your guards hate them because they're uncomfortable." "That's exactly why the attackers won't be watching them." Talvin's expression suggested he found the idea of trusting a human's tactical judgment deeply offensive. But he was also a soldier who respected results. The human had moved faster than his sensors could track when the attack began. She'd assessed the threat before his systems had finished computing it. "The west tunnels haven't been used in 2 years, he said. "Then they're perfect." Sarah finally looked up at the commander, and her eyes were hard as diamonds. "Unless you have a better plan, sir. 'Cause staying here guarantees casualties." Another arrow struck the wall. This one trailed phosphoric compound that began eating through the reinforcement. "Chemical warfare," Talvin noted. "They're escalating. West tunnels. Now." Sarah moved with Alira still cradled against her chest, keeping her body between the princess and every possible firing angle. The child's face was pressed into her shoulder, her breathing controlled in the rhythm Sarah had taught her during their practice exercises. Exercises that Vishara had thought were games. The human had been preparing her daughter for exactly this scenario for months. As they reached the corridor, Vishara caught Sarah's arm. "You knew this was coming." Sarah met her gaze without apology. "I suspected, Your Majesty. The security patterns were too regular. Your court has enemies who study routines." Alira needed to know how to stay calm under threat. I taught her through play. "You should have reported your concerns. Would you have believed me?" The question hung between them as another explosion rocked the nursery they'd just abandoned. Vishara had her answer. They descended into the service tunnels, 12 guards surrounding the royal family, a human woman carrying their future like she was born to it. Behind them, the palace erupted into controlled chaos as security forces mobilized, as ancient protocols activated, as the machinery of royal protection ground into motion. But in the narrow passages beneath the palace, Sarah Chen moved with the confidence of someone who'd walked a dozen similar corridors in a dozen similar situations. Her hands were gentle on the princess. Her eyes never stopped scanning. And Queen Vishara began to understand that perhaps her military advisors had been catastrophically wrong about human weakness. The tunnels smelled of old stone and recycled air. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh blue-white, turning shadows into potential threats. Talvan took point with 4 guards, his weapon systems active and tracking every thermal signature within range. Behind him, Sarah maintained her position with Alira, the child now calm enough to walk but still holding tight to her nanny's hand. "Numbers?" Sarah said quietly, and Alira began counting again, her voice steady in the mathematical rhythm that kept panic at bay. Vishara walked beside them, close enough to hear the child's counting, far enough to maintain tactical spacing. She'd been trained in warfare since childhood, had commanded fleets before assuming the throne, understood strategy and sacrifice, but watching this human woman manage her daughter's fear with nothing but patience and presence felt like observing a completely different kind of strength. The first tunnel intersection opened into 3 directions. Talvan raised his fist, and the column halted. "Motion sensors detect movement in passage 2, he reported. Known origin. Could be maintenance drones. Could be scouts," Sarah countered. "How old is this detection system?" Talvan's expression suggested the question was beneath answering, but he checked his data anyway. 4 years. Then they know about it. These tunnels have layout plans filed with the Central Archive. Anyone with palace access could have studied them. They've had months to place equipment. The commander's mandibles clicked in irritation, but he redirected the column toward passage 3 without argument. They moved deeper into the tunnel network, away from the established routes, into sections that hadn't seen regular foot traffic in decades. Sarah's tactical assessments continued. She noted structural weaknesses, potential ambush points, and evacuation alternatives with the precision of someone who'd spent considerable time studying these very corridors. Vishara filed each observation away, adding them to the growing list of questions she intended to have answered once her daughter was safe.
"You were military,"
the Queen said. It wasn't a question. "Everyone serves something, Your Majesty." "That's not an answer." Sarah's smile was brief, professional, revealing nothing. "I served the Colonial Defense Initiative for 8 years. Counterinsurgency specialist, pattern recognition and threat assessment. When I left active duty, I discovered that keeping children safe uses surprisingly similar skills. You're overqualified to be a nanny. I'm exactly qualified to keep your daughter alive." They passed through another intersection. The walls here showed age, cracks spreading through ancient mortar like frozen lightning. Water damage stained the ceiling in abstract patterns that suggested the drainage systems above had failed long ago. This section of the palace was forgotten, abandoned to entropy, while the public areas gleamed with maintained perfection. Alira's counting had reached 347 when the lights went out. Emergency backup systems should have activated instantly. They didn't. The darkness was absolute, swallowing them whole, turning the tunnel into a sensory void where sound became the only reference point. "Nobody move," Talvan commanded, his voice coming from somewhere ahead in the blackness. Sarah had already acted. Vishara felt it happen, heard the whisper of fabric as the human woman moved, the soft sound of Alira being lifted, the rustle of repositioning. When Talvan's emergency torch finally activated, bathing the tunnel in red emergency light, Sarah had placed herself and the princess against the wall, minimizing their profile, maximizing protection. "Power grid failure," one of the guards reported. "Localized to this section. Someone cut the main feeds." Or activated a signal jammer, Sarah suggested. Check your communicators. Talvin's device showed nothing but static. So did every other unit in the column. They were isolated, cut off from the palace network, trapped in tunnels that suddenly felt less like escape routes and more like carefully constructed killing corridors. They herded us, Vashara said, understanding blooming cold in her chest. The nursery attack was designed to push us exactly here. Sarah nodded in the crimson light. They studied our patterns, predicted our responses, and built their trap accordingly. Professional work, expensive. Well planned. Then we're walking into an ambush. We've been walking through it, they just haven't sprung it yet. The statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. Every step they'd taken had been choreographed by an enemy who understood palace security better than the palace guards themselves. Someone had betrayed them, provided intelligence, mapped their escape routes, and now waited somewhere ahead in the darkness. Talvan's weapon systems activated with mechanical precision. Around him, the guards formed a defensive perimeter, their training overriding the fear that must have been building beneath their professional exteriors. "We can't advance," one guard said. "Unknown force ahead, unknown strength. We should fortify this position and wait for rescue." "Rescue from whom?" Sarah asked. "We don't know who's compromised. Your communications are down. For all you know, half the palace guard is working with whoever planned this." "Impossible," Talvin said, but his voice carried less certainty than his words. "Is it? How else do you explain the timing, the intelligence, the perfect coordination? This wasn't planned by outsiders. Someone inside opened every door they needed." Bashara felt the weight of command settle onto her shoulders like a physical thing. Decisions in moments like this defined reigns, determined whether dynasties continued or ended in dark tunnels beneath forgotten corridors. She could fortify and hope for rescue that might never come, or she could advance into an ambush that awaited them like a patient predator. "Forward," she commanded, slowly, full tactical scanning. "And someone give the human a weapon." Talvin hesitated. Arming a foreign civilian violated protocol, tradition, and several explicit security regulations. But he was also a soldier who'd watched Sarah Chen react faster than physics allowed when arrows came through a window, who'd listened to her tactical assessments prove accurate again and again. He handed her his backup sidearm without another word. Sarah checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, verified the charge, tested the weight, and adjusted the grip with modifications that suggested extensive firearms familiarity. She kept Alira close, the child now silent, the counting abandoned in favor of complete stillness. "Stay behind me," Sarah told the princess, just like we'd practiced. They advanced into the tunnel network, moving through corridors that grew narrower, older, more oppressive with each step. The red emergency lighting created a hellish landscape of sharp shadows and distorted perspectives. Every intersection became a potential kill zone. Every sound echoed into meaninglessness. Alira began counting again, so quietly only Sarah could hear, the numbers a lifeline against rising fear. The ambush came at the 73rd Corridor Junction. Weapons fire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously, coordinated volleys designed to catch the column in a crossfire that should have shredded them instantly. But Talvan's shields activated with millisecond timing, and the guards returned fire with practiced precision that spoke to years of training. Sarah moved during the first exchange, before anyone else could react. She dropped to one knee, pulled Alira down with her, and fired 3 rounds into a tunnel opening that hadn't shown any obvious threat. Someone screamed in the darkness. A weapon clattered against stone. "Fourth position, 11 o'clock, she called out. "Hidden shooter in the maintenance alcove." Talvan redirected fire. More screaming. The ambush that should have ended them in seconds collapsed into chaos as the attackers discovered their carefully planned crossfire wasn't working. Their hidden 4th position was exposed, and their targets were fighting back with unexpected effectiveness. The battle lasted 47 seconds. When it ended, 4 attackers lay dead or dying, and the royal column had taken no casualties. Talvin approached the nearest body, rolled it over with his boot, and recognized the face. His expression went cold. "Farik Shan," he said. "Guard Captain, 3rd Division, 12 years of distinguished service." The betrayal was confirmed. Vashara stared at the dead guard's face and felt something break inside her chest. She'd known Farik Shan, had promoted him personally, had trusted him with her daughter's safety, and he'd sold them for whatever price purchased treachery. "Check the others," she commanded. 2 more dead attackers wore palace uniforms. The 4th was unknown, civilian clothing, no identification. Professional muscle hired from outside. Sarah was checking Alira, running her hands over the child's arms and legs. searching for injuries that might not be immediately visible. The princess was trembling now, the calm maintained through counting finally breaking under the reality of violence. "You did perfectly," Sarah whispered. "So brave, so strong. Your mother is proud. I'm proud. You're safe now."
The words were lies, kind lies, because they weren't safe at all.
The attack had failed, but more would come. Someone wanted the royal family dead badly enough to recruit palace guards, plan elaborate ambushes, and risk everything on coordinated assassination. This wasn't over. Vishara knelt beside her daughter, pulled the child into her arms, felt the small body shake with delayed shock. Over Alira's head, she met Sarah's eyes. "You saw the fourth position before anyone else," the queen said. "How?" "Shadow angle was wrong. The alcove was too dark for natural darkness in this lighting. Someone was actively blocking the light. I made an educated guess and got lucky." "That wasn't luck." "No, Your Majesty. That was 8 years of learning to see what other people miss." Talvin was already moving again, pushing them forward through the tunnels with renewed urgency. Behind them, the palace guards left the bodies where they fell. No time for proper death rites, no time for investigation. They ran through the ancient passages like prey fleeing predators, except now the prey was armed, dangerous, and increasingly angry. The tunnels began to rise, ascending gradually toward the palace's outer defensive perimeter. Emergency lighting here was functional. Powered by independent systems the attackers hadn't managed to compromise. They passed through checkpoints that hadn't been used in decades, security systems that activated at their presence with mechanical reluctance. "How many more?" Bashara asked Talvin. "How many of your guards have betrayed us?" "I don't know, Your Majesty." The admission cost him. Talvin had built his entire career on certainty, on knowing his people, on maintaining discipline and loyalty through personal leadership. Learning that his own guards had turned traitor was poison that would take years to purge. "We need to assume everyone is potentially compromised until proven otherwise," Sarah said. "That's not possible." "I know these people. Most of them would die before betraying the crown. And some already have. The problem is determining which category each guard falls into before they kill us." The logic was brutal, efficient, and completely correct. Vishara found herself respecting the human woman's ruthless practicality more with each passing minute. Sarah Chen had walked into the palace 6 months ago with excellent references and a warm smile, and beneath both lay the mind of a tactical specialist who saw threats in shadows and planned for disasters that might never come. Except the disaster had come, and Alira was still alive because Sarah had prepared for exactly this scenario. They emerged from the tunnels into a secondary armory located in the palace's eastern defensive ring. The room was deserted, weapons racked and waiting, armor standing in neat rows like metal sculptures. Talvon immediately began checking systems, verifying security, establishing their position within the palace network. "Communications are restored," he reported. "But I'm receiving conflicting reports. Multiple breaches reported. Fighting in 3 sectors. Someone's jamming the command network." "What about the king?" Vishara demanded. "Where is Calmore?" "No data. His location is restricted, possibly for security. Or he's dead." The words came from Sarah, blunt as hammer blows. She'd set Alira down on a supply crate, checking the child once more for injuries, but her attention never wavered from the tactical situation developing around them. "The assassination attempt was too coordinated," Sarah continued. "Multiple strike teams, simultaneous attacks, internal betrayal. This is regime change. They're not just targeting you. They're targeting the entire royal family simultaneously. Kill everyone in the line of succession, install their own puppet, and claim legitimacy through force." Talvin's expression suggested he wanted to argue but couldn't find logical grounds. The evidence supported every point Sarah had made. "This wasn't a simple assassination. This was a coup." "Then we need to reach the central command," Bashara said. "Secure communications, mobilize loyal forces, and shut this down before it spreads." "You need to evacuate," Sarah countered. "Get off-world. Preserve the dynasty. If you die here, whoever planned this wins regardless of what happens next." "I am Queen of Valth. I don't run. Alira needs you alive more than she needs you heroic." The two women stared at each other, Monarch and Nanny both absolutely committed to their positions. Alira watched them both, her small face showing understanding beyond her years. She'd stopped shaking. The counting had steadied her, and now she waited for the adults to determine her fate. "Mommy should stay," the princess said, her voice clear in the armory's stillness. "Sarah taught me about duty. Queens don't run away. Queens protect their people. Vishara felt her heart break and soar simultaneously. Her daughter understood. 4 years old, traumatized by assassination attempts and underground chases, and she understood what it meant to wear the crown. Sarah will take you somewhere safe, Vishara told her daughter. No, Sarah said. Everyone stopped. Guards turned. Talvin's weapon systems activated reflexively, because humans didn't tell Valthek Queens what would or wouldn't happen. Sarah met Vishara's gaze without apology. I was hired to protect your daughter. That means keeping her with the person most capable of ensuring her survival. Right now, that's you, surrounded by loyal guards, in a defensible position with access to military assets. If I run with her, we're alone, vulnerable, and isolated. I can protect her against individual threats. I can't protect her against armies. You can. The tactical assessment was flawless. It was also devastating because it meant Alira would stay in the palace in danger, rather than escaping to uncertain safety elsewhere. We stay together, Vishara decided. Move to Central Command, restore communications. End this. They armed themselves from the armory stores. Even Sarah, who selected equipment with the expertise of someone who'd done this before. She fitted Alira with a light armor vest designed for junior training programs, adjusted the straps carefully, and made the child promise to stay close no matter what happened. The journey to Central Command took them through the palace's main corridors, past windows that showed smoke rising from 3 different sections, past bodies of guards who died fighting each other, past evidence of a civil war that had erupted in the span of an hour. The betrayal ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Whoever had planned this had spent months, maybe years, recruiting traitors and positioning assets. They found the first Loyalist forces defending the approaches to Central Command. 36 guards under Captain Salmora, a veteran who'd served with Talvon for 20 years. She'd established a defensive perimeter around the command center's entrance and was holding off repeated attacks from forces wearing guard uniforms. The commander, Salmora said, relief flooding her face. We've been cut off. Can't reach anyone. Didn't know who survived. Status? Talvin demanded. 5 major breaches. Traitor forces control the Western Palace, the residential sectors, and the transportation hub. We hold command, the armory districts, and the throne room. King Kalmor evacuated to the emergency bunker with Crown Prince Talvin. They're secure but isolated. Vishara felt relief cascade through her. Her husband and son were alive. The dynasty would survive. Whatever happened next, the line would continue. And the traitor's leadership? She asked. Grand Chamberlain Vestok. He's declared you unfit to rule, claimed the king is incapacitated, and named himself regent. Half the court has sworn loyalty to him. Vestok. Vishara felt fury ignite behind her sternum. The Grand Chamberlain had been her father's closest advisor, had served the crown for 40 years, had held her as a child, and he'd waited decades for the perfect moment to betray everything he'd sworn to protect. They moved into Central Command, a vast space filled with holographic displays showing the battle unfolding across the palace. Red indicators marked traitor-held zones. Blue showed loyalist positions. The map was too much red, too little blue, and growing worse moment by moment. Sarah studied the displays with professional intensity. They're hurting you, she said finally. Look at the attack patterns. They're not trying to win everywhere. They're pushing your forces into concentrated positions where you feel safe. Standard siege tactics, Talvon observed. Concentrate the enemy, then crush them with overwhelming force. Which means they have overwhelming force coming, Sarah said. Something big. Something they've kept hidden until you gathered everyone into convenient killing zones. What would you suggest? Vishara asked. Sarah touched the holographic display, manipulating the map with practiced ease. Don't concentrate. Disperse. Make them chase you through the palace. Force them to spread thin. They can't win if they can't find you. That's cowardice, Salmora said. We hold and fight. You hold and die, Sarah corrected. They're not attacking your defensive positions because they don't need to. They're waiting for something. Ship-launched ordnance, maybe. Heavy artillery. Something that makes your walls meaningless. Talvin's expression went dark. She's right. If they've compromised the guard, they could have compromised orbital defenses. One precision strike from a heavy cruiser would flatten this entire section. The realization spread through the command center like poison. The walls weren't protection. The defenses were traps. Immediate evacuation, Vishara commanded. Disperse forces. Mobile defense. Make them work for every corridor. Alarms began screaming before she finished speaking. The holographic displays flashed crimson warnings that painted everyone's faces in hellish light. Orbital sensors showed 3 heavy cruisers in firing position, their weapons hot, targeting solutions locked on the palace. "Get down!" Sarah shouted. She grabbed Alira and ran, not toward the reinforced bunker where everyone else was diving, but toward the exterior wall. Her shoulder hit the emergency exit panel and she was through, into the corridor beyond, moving with the child clutched against her chest. The world exploded behind them. The precision strike punched through 6 levels of reinforced palace structure like tissue paper, and Central Command ceased to exist in a sphere of superheated plasma. Everyone inside died instantly, vaporized before their brains could process pain. Sarah and Alira survived because the human woman had trusted her instincts over fortifications, had seen the trap before it closed, and had chosen escape over defense. They stumbled through corridors filled with smoke and falling debris. Behind them, fires raged. Around them, the palace groaned like a wounded animal. Sarah's armor had saved her from the worst of the blast wave, but blood streamed from a cut above her eye, and her left arm hung at an awkward angle. She still carried Alira, still moved with purpose, still protected the princess with her own body. They found survivors in the eastern gallery. 20 guards, a handful of court officials, and Queen Vishara, whose personal shields had saved her from the blast that killed most of her command staff. The queen's face was a mask of fury and grief, but her eyes stayed clear, calculating. "Sarah," she said, the word carrying more weight than any title. "Most of command is gone," Sarah reported. "Talvon, Salmora, everyone in the center. They knew where we'd gather. They waited until we felt safe, then struck. My husband? Unknown. The bunker might have held, or it might be buried. We need to assume we're alone." Vishara nodded, accepting the brutal assessment. Around her, the surviving guards were looking to her for orders, for hope, for something to hold on to in the chaos. "We end this now," the queen said. "Find Vestik. Kill everyone who stands with him. Restore order or die trying." "Your Majesty, the girl," Sarah gestured to Alira, still held in her arms. Vishara looked at her daughter, this small person who'd survived assassination attempts, underground chases, and orbital bombardment. The child's face was smudged with dirt and fear, but her eyes stayed steady. "She stays with me," Vishara decided. "If we fall, she falls. But she'll see what it means to fight for the crown she'll one day wear." Sarah nodded once, a gesture of understanding and respect between 2 women who'd both chosen duty over safety, who'd both committed to protecting this child regardless of cost. The final battle began in the throne room, where Vostok had gathered his forces in a grotesque mockery of coronation ceremony. He sat on the stolen throne wearing regalia ripped from corpses, surrounded by traitor guards who'd bought their advancement with the blood of loyalty. Vishara walked through the shattered palace halls with 20 guards and a human nanny carrying her daughter. They were outnumbered 5-1, outgunned, exhausted, and facing an enemy who'd planned this coup for years. But Vishara was queen, and she was done running. The throne room doors exploded inward, blown off their hinges by precision charges that sent fragments spinning into the traitor ranks. The loyalist guards poured through the opening with weapons blazing, and the palace civil war reached its terrible climax. Sarah stayed back, keeping Alira safe behind a toppled pillar, but her weapon stayed active. She picked her targets with surgical precision, dropping traitor guards who tried to flank the loyalist position. Her injured arm made aiming difficult, but years of training compensated. Vishara fought like the warrior queen she'd been trained to be since childhood, her personal shields absorbing incoming fire while she advanced on Vostok with cold determination. The Grand Chamberlain tried to flee when he realized his position was failing, tried to escape through hidden passages he'd used to betray his oaths. The queen caught him at the threshold, put her weapon against his head, and asked him why. "You're weak," Vostok said, hatred burning in his eyes. "You hired a human to raise the future queen. You dishonor our people by allowing lesser species into positions of trust. I acted to preserve Valthek's strength. You murdered my people," Vishara corrected. "You betrayed everything the crown represents." "And you did it for nothing." She pulled the trigger. The throne room fell silent as the traitor guards realized their leader was dead, their cause finished, their lives forfeit. Some threw down their weapons. Others chose to fight until overwhelmed. None survived the next 10 minutes. When it ended, when the last traitor had fallen and the fires were being extinguished, when relief forces finally arrived from loyal garrison outside the palace, Vishara found Sarah sitting against the pillar with Alira in her lap. The human woman's face was pale from blood loss, her injured arm finally immobilized by a guard medic, but her eyes stayed alert. "Thank you," Vishara said, kneeling beside them. "Just doing my job, Your Majesty. Your job was Nanny. You performed as an elite special forces operator." Sarah smiled, tired but genuine. "The best nannies are the ones who keep children alive. The methods vary, but the mission stays constant." Illyra stirred in Sarah's arms, looked up at her mother, and asked the question that would define the next decade of Vault-Tec history. "Is Daddy alive?" King Calmor emerged from the bunker 2 hours later, along with Crown Prince Talvin, both unharmed but shaken. The bunker's communication systems had been sabotaged, isolating them from the battle, leaving them helpless while the palace burned. They'd heard the bombardment, felt the impacts, and feared the worst. The reunion happened in the throne room, still scorched from battle, still littered with evidence of civil war. The royal family held each other while guards stood watch, while medics treated wounded, while the machinery of government slowly ground back to motion. Sarah Chen stood nearby, her arm in a proper sling now, her injuries being treated by royal physicians who'd been shocked to learn she was human. Most Vault-Tec had never seen humans up close, had only heard stories of the soft species from distant systems. Those stories would change after today. Calmor approached her after the family reunion, his expression combining gratitude and confusion. "My wife tells me you saved our daughter's life multiple times today. She's an exceptional child, Your Majesty. Worth saving." The military advisors said humans were too weak to work palace security. The military advisors were wrong about many things, sir. The king laughed, a sound of genuine amusement despite everything. "Indeed. When this is over, when we've rebuilt and restored order, I would like to discuss expanding your position. Head of royal protection, perhaps. Clearly, we need expertise in threat assessment that we currently lack. I'm happy being a nanny, Your Majesty. The pay is adequate, and I genuinely enjoy teaching your daughter mathematics. Though I would appreciate access to better training equipment. Illyra's hand-to-hand combat fundamentals need work." This time, both the king and queen laughed. The idea of a 4-year-old princess learning combat techniques was absurd, except it had probably saved her life today by keeping her calm and responsive during chaos. "Whatever you require," Vishara promised. "Consider your position permanent, your authority expanded, and your methods endorsed." The reconstruction of palace security took 3 months and resulted in the execution of 47 traitors, the dismissal of 600 guards whose loyalty remained questionable, and the complete overhaul of every protocol Vestok might have compromised. Sarah Chen was interviewed extensively, her tactical recommendations implemented, her observations about security vulnerabilities addressed. She continued working primarily as Illyra's nanny, though her official title expanded to include security consultation. The princess resumed her lessons, now including more structured training in emergency protocols, tactical awareness, and combat fundamentals appropriate for her age. The human woman, who'd been dismissed as weak and unsuitable, became one of the most respected members of the royal household. Guards who'd initially scorned her presence now sought her advice. Court officials who'd questioned her appointment now whispered that perhaps humans weren't as soft as reputation suggested. And Princess Illyra grew up learning that strength came in many forms, that weakness was often a mask for capability, and that the human woman who'd destroyed elite assassins while carrying her to safety was teaching her the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones everyone underestimates. Sarah stood in the rebuilt nursery, watching Illyra practice counting in the rhythm that had saved her life. The princess reached 100 and looked up with a smile. "Again?" she asked. "Again," Sarah confirmed, "but this time factor in tactical movement. Count while you move to cover positions. Make the numbers work for you." The child began counting and moving, her small body flowing through patterns that would seem like play to casual observers. But Sarah saw the foundations being laid, the lessons that would one day make this little girl into a queen who could protect herself, who could see threats before they materialized, who could survive in a universe that often targeted the strongest first. Queen Vishara watched from the doorway, silent, observing the training that looked like games. She'd learned to trust Sarah's methods completely after the coup attempt. If the humans said Illyra needed to learn tactical movement through counting exercises, then that's what would happen. "She'll be formidable," Vishara said eventually. "She already is, Your Majesty." I'm just helping her realize it. The queen entered the nursery, sat beside Sarah on the cushioned floor, and watched her daughter count and move through patterns that combined mathematics with survival instincts. "The court still whispers about you," Vishara said. "They call you the human storm. They say you moved faster than physics allowed, that you killed 20 assassins single-handedly, that you carried my daughter through walls of fire. Rumors grow in the retelling, but the core truth remains. You saved us. A human saved the Valthek royal family when our own people betrayed us. Species doesn't determine loyalty, Your Majesty. Character does. I made a commitment to protect Illyra. I keep my commitments. They sat in comfortable silence while the princess counted to 300, moved through her patterns, and demonstrated the fundamental truth that Sarah had been trying to teach the Valthek court for months. Strength isn't always loud. Protection doesn't always look like armor. And the most dangerous guardian is often the one everyone mistook for weakness until the moment danger arrived. Sarah Chen remained Princess Illyra's nanny for another 12 years, long enough to see the child grow into a young woman who could fight, think, and lead with equal capability. When Illyra finally ascended to the throne after her mother's peaceful retirement, her first official act was to appoint Sarah as her personal advisor. The human who'd destroyed elite assassins while carrying a 4-year-old princess through burning corridors became one of the most influential figures in Valthek politics. She never wore armor, never carried visible weapons, and never stopped teaching that the most powerful protection came from preparation, awareness, and the absolute refusal to underestimate anyone based on species, size, or gentle appearance. The galaxy learned slowly what the Valthek royal family had discovered through fire and blood. Humans might look soft, might seem weak, might appear unsuited for positions of trust and danger, right up until the moment the universe demanded they prove otherwise. Then everyone remembered why humanity's military academies produced the most effective protection specialists in known space, why human bodyguards commanded premium prices across 36 systems, and why the gentle Nanny who played blocks with children could destroy elite assassination teams without breaking her warm smile. Sarah Chen retired eventually, decades later, having served 3 generations of Valtech royalty. She returned to Earth wealthy, honored, and forever remembered as the human who'd taught an alien dynasty that strength wearing a gentle face was still strength. Princess Illyra, by then Queen Illyra, sent her a final message before her departure. Thank you for teaching me to count when I was afraid. The numbers still help. They always help. Sarah's response was simple, professional, and completely sincere. Stay alert, stay prepared. And remember that panic is just action without direction. Give it direction, and you can survive anything. The message became the unofficial motto of the reformed Royal Protection Service, carved into training facility walls, taught to every new recruit, and passed down through generations who learned that sometimes the most important lessons come from the least expected teachers. And, somewhere in the galaxy, on a dozen different worlds, human nannies continued doing their jobs with quiet competence, warm smiles, and the absolute capability to destroy anyone who threatened the children under their protection. Because that's what humans do. They adapt, they protect, and they prove again and again that gentle exteriors can hide the most formidable strength in the universe. The Valthek learned that lesson in fire and blood. Other species would learn it eventually too. Human nature guaranteed it.